Hello and welcome back to the Toffee Blues YouTube channel, your source for all things Everton. My name's Thomas, back again on the channel today with another player review, joined by Terry McAllister from the Toffee Blues as always. Today, as we've mentioned a couple of times, getting towards the end of the player reviews now. First one up, possibly the player who played the least amount of minutes this season. We're going to be looking at Jean-Philippe Gbamin. Obviously, we can't really talk too much about what happened to him this season. Played a couple of games, and then had a string of really quite severe injuries. Probably not going to be back for the very start of the season, but might be back, early, like a few games in. Obviously, we don't know much about him, but kind of when we first signed him, Terry, what were your kind of first impressions of the signing?
I'd be lying if I said I'd seen much of him before he signed. I'd be lying if I said I'd seen much of him since he signed. But it was one of them, wasn't it? He was brought in as the fabled replacement for Idrissa Gana Gueye. And I think the club were at pains to sort of make the point going, he's not the same type of player. He's going to fill that role in the team, but he's going to change the sort of, the formula in the middle. Like, he won't be one of those all-action, covers every blade of grass type midfielders, but he will give us a little bit more defensive, solidarity and, a little bit more physicality in the middle, which as games since have proven we really lack. He was brought in and he came in after the African Cup of Nations, didn't he? So he didn't actually get a pre-season last season, which I think contributed a big way to his injury. It was a freak injury. But he was brought in and he just went straight into Premier League action, didn't he? He was brought off the bench against Palace on the opening day. And to be honest, he didn't look good. He looked completely, off it, out of his depth even. Like, it was got the game around him was travelling too fast. But I think that was a mistake of Marco Silva bringing him on when he had no pre-season. He'd hardly had much training time with his teammates. He was new to the league, everything. I think he threw him to the wolves a little bit in that game, but I don't know what you think.
I thought it made a lot of sense when we first signed him because because we signed him and Delph. And obviously, Delph was never going to be the Gueye replacement, was he? So it was always going to be Gbamin. Different players, as you mentioned, but that like defensive prowess that he had. And I think our midfield has seriously suffered from it. I think one of the main people who suffered from it is Andre Gomes. To be fair, we know he needs a defensive midfielder beside him, and he hasn't had that all season. Again, like yourself, I don't think I've ever watched him play a game of football. For Mainz, 25 million was kind of around the fee we got for Idrissa Gueye, so I guess the club were just looking, to kind of replace him in that regard. It wasn't like selling an older player for less money and wasting money. It was clearly just a like for like signing. Again, there's not much we can talk about for this season. I agree he got thrown in too early. I don't really understand why he had to come on at the point he did. I'm sure there was other options on the bench, but clearly they wanted to see what he could do. Massively suffered from not having a pre-season. But that's all we can pretty much say at the moment. But kind of what we should definitely move on to is kind of, it's the cliche, isn't it? Like, it's going to be like a new signing. To be fair, he's played like one game, if that. So what do you see as like potential impact being like next season? Do you think he'll kind of come straight in, or what do you envisage his development going like once he's finally back from this injury? As long as he doesn't get injured again, of course.
Yeah, provided he doesn't get injured again, like, I can see it really being dependent on who we bring in. Like, if we bring in a couple of midfielders, especially if we bring in someone who's already been in the Premier League, then I can see Gbamin getting, eased in gently rather than thrown straight back in. And repeating the same mistakes. He's gonna, he's had he'll have more than a year out by the time he comes back playing. I think the club still have high hopes for him. Ancelotti, before the end of the season, when he was touched on transfers, he had mentioned Gbamin a couple of times. He didn't want supporters to forget about Gbamin. It's not like we just suddenly, not adding this season, that's it. Then we've got a plan for life without him. I think the club still see a player in there. They just think he's been, horrendously unlucky with injuries. And we have seen players come back from injury. Like Ross Barkley had a horrendous injury when he was young and came back from it. He will be a new signing. Like, I don't even count the Palace and the Wolves game, because let's be honest, like, he was just settling into the team, and you touched on a good point there. Like, I think his injury has affected Andre Gomes a lot because for 20 odd million each. I think they were meant to be the cornerstone of the midfield. Like they were meant to be the two automatic starters. And then it was going to be, if it was a middle three for Silva, it was going to be, either Delph or Davies or whoever, or Iwobi, playing in that third position, coming in and out. Whether it's with Gomez or not, I think if he can stay fit and come back in, it's going to be very interesting because I remember being at the Wolves game where he started, and I watched the warm up, like the warm up drills they do, and something I'd noticed which we hadn't done the season before was there was like a drill of the back four passing it between each other, which they often do. So like right back to centre back to left back, like those short passes right across to get, make them feel comfortable. Gbamin was in the middle of it, making it a 5. So clearly he was going to be that sort of like Gareth Barry, sitting type player. Obviously athletically, we don't know yet. He could be someone who carries the ball as well. But the role that sort of Gomez has been fulfilling is post-lockdown where he's collecting the ball from the back four. I think that's the type of player Gbamin's going to be. He's not going to be a box-to-box type player. He's going to be a sitting holding player. And that's badly what we need. So I'm just, fingers crossed he can come in, stay, fit and be of use. Because we don't know if he's going to be any good. I hope not. But these players who come in from other leagues, it's always a gamble because you look at Sandro and players like that. There's Klassen. There's no guarantee he's going to come in and not going to be like that. But different era, different recruitment team. You'd hope that Gbamin's going to be better than that. But Ancelotti's said himself, didn't he? He had an injury like that. He had like a year out. Ancelotti in his career when he was a player, so he understands about Gbamin's feeling and he's come in and the manager who bought him has been sacked and the new manager's in place and will have been in place for absolutely ages by the time he kicks up the ball again. So it must be hard for him, but once he gets training with the first team again, it's going to be a real option, something we a complete mystery. It's not going to be like one of those cliches like a new signing, but it's a player you've seen 100 times already. It is a new signing, literally.
Yeah, and obviously, as you mentioned there, he was kind of signed as that traditional, maybe number 6, if you will. He was just going to sit in front of the defence, I think, be that kind of shielder. But obviously, Ancelotti he doesn't really favour that kind of system. He does prefer a 2-man midfield, which has obviously led to massive problems for us. I think him coming back will be good generally to put pressure on players like Tom Davies, who it got to a point in like the restart where Gomez, Sigurdsson, and Davies. There were only 3 midfielders, and we played 2 in midfield. They didn't have to even try that hard. Like they had no competition. Delph was always injured. They knew he wasn't coming back. Now, when Gbamin and Delph do come back, and Ancelotti's mentioned himself, he needs competition in the squad because it drives players forwards, like demands high performances. So I think that would definitely be an interesting kind of aspect. But let's think. We do have to kind of think about where he does fit in now. As you mentioned, Gomez was kind of asked to play that role of picking it up from the back four kind of forwards, which he struggled with. He's obviously not that kind of midfielder, but that was kind of all we had. If we do stick with the 4-4-2, as I imagine we do, and Gbamin does play in that centre midfield role, who do you see him kind of playing next to? If he becomes a starter, who's next to him in your opinion?
Any of them, because I don't think any of the others are like him. I think all the others. If there's 2 positions, like I don't know, the left and the right centre midfields. I say the left centre midfielder is the one who progresses with the ball and gets more involved with the attack and play. The right midfielder sits and controls. There's Gbamin for the right midfielder, and then everyone else for the left. So obviously, I think the ideal scenario for the previous management team would have been Gbamin and Gomez. They were brought in. In fact, it might still be considering Marcel Brands bought both. But that could be a good partnership. But with Ancelotti now in, there's no guarantee that it'll be like that. He could bring someone in. Say we're linked heavily with Alan. He could see Alan as that sit and control and player and put Gbamin next to him and ask Gbamin to get a little carry the ball a little bit, forward a little bit more and have a lot more physicality and a lot more strength in there. I don't see Gbamin struggling alongside any of the players we've got now. I think the others will all struggle without a player like Gbamin. I when we signed him, after watching that drill that he done and watching him in the Wolves game, I thought, okay, so we haven't really replaced Idrissa Gana Gueye. What we've done is we've upgraded Schneiderlin. Like, he's going to be that type of sitting number 6, but he's going to be obviously a little bit, ideally better than Schneiderlin. Little bit more athletic, a little bit quicker, but he's the same mould of player. He sits in the number 6 role. He doesn't charge everywhere like a Kante or whatever. So I think if he can hack it, then he'd be fine with any of them. It's the others who can't deal without him.
Yeah, I agree. I can almost see him when he's back to fitness kind of just coming into the team, to be fair, if they don't get the recruitment that they want. I mean, Alan, who is probably the most linked centre midfielder at the moment, there's all sorts of rumours coming about. We have no idea really what's going on. Everyone likes to say, we've agreed a fee. We haven't. We've agreed personal terms, all that. But basically, from what we have at the moment, I can see Gbamin having to come straight in, to be honest, because we can't carry on with the centre midfield partnership that we did have. And Gbamin, as you mentioned, he doesn't need anyone else to perform his role. Basically, he can perform a defensive midfielder without anyone next to it. It doesn't actually matter. Players like Gomez, he can only perform in his role, and he can only keep up with the pace really if he has that tackler next to him who's then going to feed him the ball, and then he can do more with it. So I mean, I'm not sure I could see Sigurdsson fit next to him, because Sigurdsson refuses to play in a 4-4-2. Apparently, he hates playing central midfield. He obviously prefers to be further forwards, which he could be given license to do with a more defensive presence, but I'm not really sure how that'll work, because obviously Ancelotti kind of favours the left midfielder, kind of drifted into that number 10, so there's not really space for Gylfi Sigurdsson. Tom Davies, I mean, what do you say about him now? Well, he hasn't improved enough. I'm not sure how he'd work next to Gbamin, because I think if you do play a defensive midfielder like Gbamin is, you then need a more creative player next to him, like Andre Gomez, to be fair, and potentially Alan that they might bring in to kind of work in that kind of box-to-box role. And I can't see Tom Davies fitting in at all in that system, because he doesn't really do anything at all. But I hope he does come back soon. I hope he is up to the pace. Because obviously, not only has he just had, he's never adapted to the league, he's also just had a year off football, to be fair. So he's going to have to be given time. But I think the club will realise they need him, quite desperately in the midfield now. I mean, that's all I've really got to say. If you got any more to add on Gbamin before we end this video?
No. I mean, there's not much you can say about the season he's had. Just that, hopefully he comes back and he can stay fit, because, we need him. I think any of the midfielders who we've been playing will immediately improve with a player like that next to them in that role. That's not even speaking to how good Gbamin is, because we don't know, but he is needed. We're basically getting linked with, lots of centre midfielders. A lot of people think we need more than one centre midfielder. That's because we're imagining the team without Gbamin. If Gbamin had been fit all season, I think we'd have a much better picture of what we need in midfield at the minute. But I think he'll come in, and new midfielders who we buy, either it's one or two, he'll probably be allowed to come in slower and more careful than he did last time. Where we obviously the way he did when he signed, no comment on after the lockdown. I think that's just a freak injury, playing, head tennis or whatever it was. Yeah. It was just one of them. But yeah, let's just hope he can stay fit, because we've signed a player there, and we've not even seen him, and he's probably not even. I can't imagine he's seen much of his teammates. I think he must just go into Finch Farm, put his kit on, and just go on the bike. He must be feeling a bit very lonely at the minute with the being here a year, and he's not really been involved, has he?
Yeah, I agree. So that's pretty much it. Do let us know down in the comments below what you think about Gbamin. Do you see him coming straight to the team? If so, who do you play next to him in that two central midfielders role, which I would imagine we will carry on playing? Obviously, thank you to Terry for coming on. Thank you all for supporting the videos. Do check out all our social media in the description. A couple more player reviews to do left to do before we can start looking ahead to next season. Thankfully, we can almost get this one behind us, but a couple more to do, including Anthony Gordon, which will be coming up. It might even be released at this point. We don't actually know when these videos go out when we record them. So Anthony Gordon will be going up as well. We've done Mason Holgate. We've done pretty much most of the squad now. So do check out all those videos. So thank you very much for watching, and join us next time on the Toffee Blues.